think about all the things that malt contributes to a beer. We've got the colour, we've got the mouthfeel, the body. It provides all the alcohol, the sweetness, things like the head retention, the foam, part of the aroma. So malt is the key ingredient, I believe, in beer. Why is barley the most preferred? There's a couple of reasons. One, it's got really good extract. Two, it's got a good amount of enzymes in there. Three, that flavour is what we associate with malt. And four, it's got the husk, so it's a lot easier to process than some of these other grains as well. We contract growers to grow a lot of these really old heirloom varieties. We're messing around at the moment with varieties that date back to 8,000, 9,000 BC that are phenomenally different to the modern day varieties we've got. Australia's got a great barley breeding history, but it's all been about yield, and from a craft malting point of view, the flavour that we're able to get from some of these older varieties is off the charts compared to some of these new ones. At the moment, we're right in the middle of harvest. The grain has dried out and the rush is on to get the grain off before we get any rain on. Rain starts to downgrade the quality of the grain, and a lot of rain can actually make the grain start to germinate, which is no good for malt because that's our job to germinate in a controlled environment. All around the region, we've got farmers working day and night, truck drivers transporting the grain into the malthouse. Kids are getting home from school and jumping on chaser bins and tractors and those kind of things to help with the family harvest and to get the grain off before all the summer storm starts to hit. I was born out here in the bush. Family have been farming here in the Riverina for 4 generations. During the Millennium Drought, which was a pretty tough time for farming out here, the writing was kind of on the wall that the farm wouldn't be able to support me at that time. I moved across to Voyager just up the road and went to university there and did an engineering degree. But what changed for me was meeting a girl who ended up becoming my wife. She was studying winemaking. In an attempt to impress her, started learning a little bit about wine, and it changed my perception about what I was drinking. And that ultimately flowed over into craft beer, which I became obsessed with it.
Righto!
One of the things that I remember kind of in discussions with my wife was the connection that the growers had with the wine grapes and the story of provenance and terroir, and from my point of view, seeing the way that the wine grape growers were recognised with their name on a bottle of wine and having that connection. As a grain grower, I felt cheated and robbed that we didn't have the same kind of connection. I kind of thought, oh well, look, let's start a brewery up, and our point of difference was going to be we're going to use grain from our farm. We got this beer project up and running for our town called Brettell Beer, and we just assumed that we'd be able to take our grain somewhere, get it malted and bring it back again. And that just wasn't the case. So, it's done in huge scale in massive operations. For us to be able to take a small amount of barley that could tell a story, essentially we had to malt it ourselves. Myself and Brad, good mate that I grew up with, in our shed on our farm, put together a malting vessel, and never would have dreamed when we started, welding together a few bits and pieces on our farm to create malt for a brewery that we were intending and putting together, would have transformed into a malt tourism, extremely unique. I don't believe there's anything like this anywhere in the world, let alone in Australia. Brellen's a small, 300 people population, rural farming community. Probably 100% of the beer consumed 10 years ago were macro mid-strength lagers. So for us to try and introducing craft beer to our town, we thought we needed to make them be a part of it. We crowdsourced the project with the anticipation of raising $15,000 to get it off the ground. We raised $45,000, which again, for a population of 300 in a small country town, was a tremendous feat. And the community backed it and got right behind it. We had blind tasting nights where they'd turn up and taste all these beers and give them ratings and scores, and there were some pretty funny comments there from some of them talking about, this one tastes like effing sump oil and those kind of things. But the beer that they chose was the mid-strength golden ale that we still brew to this day. And I think at the time it was authentically the first beer that you could pinpoint the exact location in a paddock and really champion the growers behind it.
At the moment, all of our barley goes to Voyager and they distribute it to the brewers. It's a really interesting concept that we actually know where our barley goes and we can meet the people that actually use our barley to make beer.
We were soon kind of contacted by plenty of other brewers and distillers that wanted to tell a similar story and were saying, hey, can you malt this for us and can you do this for us? So developing the brewery never actually really got off the ground. We've kind of been busy creating malt for brewers and distillers ever since that first day. Just obviously don't get too close and don't want to burn the hole.
Yeah.
So, all good, all good. No, we'll put a bit of butter up around it.
It'll be a double wrap.
So we've got our smoking unit in here where the wood chips go in.
Yep.
And then basically we fill this smaller germination vessel up with smoke. And
Sweet. Oh, wow.
you look at a lot of beers and you look at the writing on the back of them, and there'll be 3 or 4 sentences at times about the hops. And if malt even gets a mention, it's like solid malt backbone is kind of like the generic line that they seem to weave into it. For something like your organic schooner pale malt, we kiln it very lightly. We're trying to preserve those enzymes, so we're not going too hot. Obviously, the hotter and the harder we kiln it, the darker the malts get. You know, the work that we're doing with batch and wildflower, they're now able to talk about the variety, the kilning process that we're employing, the way that it's grown organically on regenerative farming.
You're out here all day long during harvest. I mean, what's the most amount of time you'll spend out here?
So we can spend up to 16 hours a day in the paddock if the weather conditions are right. We farm nearly 4,000 acres. It's all organic. We want to look after our soil to be able to give it to our children in a better state than when we bought it.
You know, at the end of the day, consumers, they're supporting an independent, small craft brewery because they are small, independent and local, and I think that they expect that the breweries are doing the same thing and supporting small, local, independent producers as well. This is where beer starts, in the paddock out here, and it takes, Chris, 7 years of planning to get a paddock prepared to grow that barley, and guys like this are the unsung heroes of the craft beer industry. Farming's a tough gig. You can be very isolated at times. That social connection and that satisfaction that they can get for some of these growers down here is really powerful, and the fact that craft beer is making that happen, there's such a big part of the story and so many great things that this craft beer revolution in Australia is having in regional Australia.
I think the coolest thing is that we're buying from a craft maltster and you're buying from, effectively you're a craft farmer, for lack of a better term. And we're all supporting each other, and that kind of loop of feedback I think is pretty neat.
One thing that I've learned since I've been involved with you guys is that it is a community and that you do care what goes on out here. We're also getting the feedback back to us on the farm as to what happens in the brewing process and the malting process. And there are certain little things that we can change on the farm when we're getting that feedback.
For me, it's hitting home because, I'm standing in a paddock that's like, this will literally be beer from Batch Brewing Company in the next 6 months or something like that. That's pretty cool.